Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, May 7th, 2020. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. Hello and welcome to the podcast this week. Happy May 7th to you. We have a lot of holidays this week, or, real holidays and fake holidays. There was May the 4th. There was Cinco de Mayo, or as some people like to call it, Revenge of the 5th.
Oh, that's
Let's
terrible.
Not go there. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Hi, Jeremy. Hi, Kishore. How you guys doing?
I'm well. How are you, Norm?
I'm doing okay.
Well, welcome back, Jeremy Williams, who's been on spring break.
Spring break 2020!
Yeah.
It felt a lot like every other day.
Oh.
Was there a way you could make it feel like a spring break even at home?
I mean, for the first time ever, and I don't know how many other families of four have four VR headsets, but for the first time ever, we got the whole family together and we went into Rec Room and we did quests, and it was such a smash hit that we did it again and again. We left the house and went into the Rec Room space and defeated zombies and bats.
You don't run into each other with four people in VR? Like, were you in separate rooms?
Yes, we were in separate rooms. Yeah, we have two quests, and so they were obviously tetherless, and then we had two PCs with wired headsets, and it was fantastic. We all have our names, so we got out. We're calling each other by our new handles.
The handles. Uh-oh.
It's fun.
And the kids were into it, but your wife was into it too?
Yeah. Well, she's definitely like the least techie, and so but she was a great healer. And at the end of the first day where we did that, because she's not a VR native, she was like, wow, today feels different. It really feels like this was a different kind of day. And I suggested that it might have been because it felt like we all left the house and like really did something.
Right.
It's just like a tinge of memories of like being somewhere else. And I feel like it was a good use of VR.
Most importantly, did you complete the quest? Which quest was it that you did?
So close. We tried all three, and there's three on the quest rather. So that's what we were kind of limited to, and we mainly did the original one. Was the golden trophy or something?
Mm-hmm.
And we almost finished it. We didn't finish any of them. I mean, as you know, these are hard experiences. We took many tries to beat any of them. You guys, you and I.
Yeah.
And we're supposedly experienced at video games, right?
Exactly.
Supposedly.
Yeah, and presumably it was teleport plus free locomotion, or just teleport for
That's
comfort?
the thing. Yeah, when we were playing, it was, I think, largely for those experiences, it was all teleport, but now it's like free locomotion is a main part of I think it's the default movement. And so yeah, like my wife would be teleport and the kids and I were free locomotion moving around. It's all very compatible. It works very well. I was careful to keep the kids, so we had to set them up with adult accounts so that we could hear each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to, make sure that they didn't go into the actual rec room, because you don't want your 10-year-old in the actual rec room with voice on. So that was like the main concern.
We need more of these VR experiences. I think VR has yet to meet the moment, and who knows how long we're going to be in this. But Rec Room is one of the few things, I think, big screen as well, where people, families can gather together and just feel like they're somewhere else, even if they're doing something that's analogous to what they could be doing at home, like watching a movie. But just having avatars, just being the visuals being different than the real world is a little bit of escapism. So that sounds fun. Welcome back then.
Thank you.
From your quests and your rec rooming and spring break. Spring break indeed. I'm full HD, guys.
You're looking good. I like your
Yeah.
shot. I mean, you even did the YouTuber, like the Gary Whitta style colored light in the background.
You know, I forgot I had those. Those are actually speakers that I have. Like desktop speakers are the one of those things that it's almost like a DVD-ROM drive where they're not essential at all to the computer experience.
Yeah.
But for the longest time, I still got them every time I built a computer for one reason or another. And like these are just Logitech speakers I got a while ago. They have like the light changing, almost like Philips style. They illuminate and change light color based on what's on your movie or what's on your screen or game. But I never use them. They've been plugged in, and only like it was a happy accident once I had set up this room. If you're watching the video, that I realized I had these RGB LEDs illuminating my back wall behind my main computer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
Ever since I started streaming on Twitch, I broke down and got the flexible LED adhesive strips. So they're in behind me, but I have my window open. So even if I turn them on, you can't see. I've succumbed to having LEDs everywhere.
I mean, that's the thing. It's so cheap to set up. Like lighting, camera gear, audio gear. One of the reasons that my shot looks better this week, I did a video last week about, and thank you, Jeremy, for cluing me into that Canon utility,
Sony.
beta utility.
Oh, right.
No,
yeah. The Canon thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's what I'm using right now, my Canon DSLR. And Sony has an app as well for live view capture, but being able to actually use a nice full frame sensor. And then I just went on Amazon and said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to go all out. And so I got a ring light. I got a couple different camera mounts. And the video I had last week was about using different video cameras for your Zoom meetings, for your Skype calls, including your iPhone, including your DSLR. And I'm doing a video this week about audio options. I'm using dedicated audios.
So preview it. If you had to choose between
Yeah.
audio or video in this age, where would you prioritize?
Audio. Well, it depends what you're doing. Are you making content? Are you making videos?
No. Just like normie that's like doing video calls with everyone for the foreseeable future.
Audio. Easily audio. I'd invest money in better audio and then just use an iPhone for video, because the iPhone is really solid for that, or an Android phone with the Droid Cam. But bad audio, and part of that is compression, part of that is internet connection, but that's the thing that ruins so much of these type of virtual meetings, and so much of videos I watch on the internet is bad audio. You guys sound great.
I'm seeing a little bit of latency with your video.
Yes, that's the one thing. The DSLR setup drops frames, and there's the most latency 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 compared to a webcam or an iPhone or a capture card. But a capture card.
We just put them on a NSFW delay just in case, because
Yeah.
Norm is.
Yep.
Foul mouth Norm.
Yeah.
We got
Sure,
a lot
how
of
about you?
news.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. No one cares about what you did last week. Sure. How was your weekend?
Weekend? What's that?
Yeah.
We started. We've had for the longest time a yard that has been overgrown with weeds that we don't use, and we finally hunkered down, weeded out everything, set up a table back there. I am now like working outside for a couple hours a day.
Wow.
And it has drastically changed my mood. I know it's a lucky thing to have. I know not everyone has access to an outdoor space, but just sitting in the sun with access to Wi-Fi that's good enough to get my work done, it's changed it's a game changer. Just being able to sit out there, and it's quiet, but then there's also just weird sounds of the neighborhood. So yesterday I learned that one of our neighbors has a chicken.
Wow.
I live in a city, and our neighbor has a chicken.
Is it a rooftop chicken farm, or just like
yeah,
in
it
their
might
backyard?
be. I can't quite locate it, but I like that chicken.
Right on.
So he and I get along.
I know what you're saying. We try to get out every day, for a walk, and the air is just intoxicating, like more so than ever. You get out there, and it feels like I'm in summer camp. It's something. I wish that we had a backyard. We do not.
Yeah. Oh, the street sounds, they sound quieter. You still get like the train lines, Kishore. Like do you feel any of that?
I mean, it's just, it all sounds a lot quieter. Right? Like I live 2 houses away from a streetcar line, and the streetcars have essentially stopped because they've suspended a lot of public transit, and it's kind of eerie. I'm like just getting used to it now after a few weeks of it. I was just thinking the other day, I went out for a drive. How weird is it going to be when we get back to like traffic and like the normalcy of just how things sound? I wonder. I really do wonder about that, because everything's gonna be louder. There's gonna be just like people everywhere. I can feel like the uptick of activity happening already. But I was out on a drive and there was basically no traffic anywhere, and I was like, this is amazing. Why can't normal life be like this?
Yeah, there'll be dissonance for sure. I don't know if there will be so much pushback, because it's going to be in the face of people wanting to feel activity and social encounters. But I think definitely some dissonance between the normal that we're feeling now and the quiet and the isolation. And there'll be a happy medium. Maybe in, places that can support it, more quiet days. But yeah, we're city folk, right? Like we don't, having a backyard, having a big front yard is a luxury, and a lot of people are in apartments that don't have access to these public shared spaces. But every time I go into the Midwest and we go to Ohio or Indiana, we look at these giant lawns and backyards, and that's what I'm thinking about. Those folks are definitely, hopefully, making the most out of having that space. We watch a lot of House Hunters these days. That's our like late night guilty pleasure, and it's so funny because that's a show that, I mean, just from a production standpoint, is fascinating. If you read like their Wikipedia page and behind the scenes stories, they make like hundreds of episodes a year and have 25 different either on staff or freelance production teams of camera crew, producer, filming at once. And this is of course pre-pandemic. So they're just cranking out on a formula content. And that means that, they have 190 seasons of this show, some of which were filmed and edited late 2019. And as we're watching those recent episodes, all we're thinking about is the houses you people on TV are choosing are the ones that you're stuck in right now. So hopefully they made good choices.
Yeah, you're in a time machine. You're in the future, and you know what they have ahead of them.
Exactly. And I'm just like, oh my God, don't choose the construction job. Don't choose having 6 months of renovation. You're going to regret it in March 2020.
Reality TV has never been so real.
It's amazing. All right.
Hey, Norm, before we go, I wanted to thank you. I didn't mean to deny you credit. You lent me one of my 4 VR headsets. You lent me the Rift S. You completed our quadfecta. Thank you very much.
And you gave me the opportunity to see someone in person.
Yeah.
That's not in my household. Even though it was socially distant. I got to see how long your hair was in person. And
it's personal distancing now. It's not social distancing. We're supposed to be socially connected.
Got it. Physical distancing.
Physical distance.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me to whatever hangout you guys are having.
Should have coordinated so you could do just a walk by or a drive by Kishore. We could have all waved. That's hard. That requires some geometry and trigonometry, right? If you're talking about groups of 3 or more for physical distancing.
It's just 3 people. It's called a triangle. Dude. It's not that complicated.
But if you include the city streets and all the obstacles and walking, three groups traversing a space together is, I think, more complicated than just 2. Anyway, thinking too much into it. Let's move on then to our top story.
Top story this week.
So I mentioned earlier, this past Monday was Star Wars Day, celebrated on the internet. May the 4th. Did you guys do anything special for Star Wars Day? Watch. I mean, Force Awakens not Force Awakens. Rise of Skywalker is on Disney Plus now. Oh, wow.
Jeremy clearly 3D printed Darth Vader. Is that a Prusa print right there?
Yeah, it's a Prusa print. I actually did, probably in January. Super high res though. You can't see
It looks great.
Yeah.
I watched some of the season 7 of Clone Wars. That show is good. The animated Clone Wars, I really enjoy.
Yeah, Dave
People don't talk
Filoni,
about that enough.
he has really taken on the mantle as the shepherd of the Star Wars universe, at least on television and on the long form storytelling. But there was a big announcement. We're going to make this our top story. Taika Waititi confirmed to be directing and co-writing a full-length Star Wars feature. This had been rumored a while back, but now Star Wars Disney has made the announcement, and he will be co-writing the screenplay with Christy Wilson Cairns. What did she do? She did
1917, right?
That's right, with Sam Mendes. Yes. So very excited for his sensibility brought to Star Wars. He, of course, was in The Mandalorian, directed the final episode, and played the droid, the assassin droid, the IG droid, and he, he's in the Disney family, in the Marvel family. He's still working on Thor: Love and Thunder, so this will have to fit in his schedule somehow.
So universal praise. I think Taika Waititi is one of like the most beloved figures and going right now. So moving beyond that, what do you want him to do? Like where, when, what? Like what kind? Like do you want kind of like a comedic take?
Yes.
That he has tended to bring?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Why not tap into that strength? I mean, it can be comedic, but tonally, but can still be epic in all the ways Star Wars is epic in terms of it being a galaxy sprawling adventure with fantastical aliens. I'm hoping no lightsaber. Let's have a Star Wars movie with no lightsaber, and you can feel the presence of Jedi or Sith or whatever. I don't care what era it's set in, but they have a blank slate right now, right? The Skywalker saga is done. They're not beholden to this the story of the hero's journey that has been for Rey and for Luke and for Anakin. So it can be whatever, and it's not a series that they've announced. They've just announced the one movie, so it could be totally a standalone. And there's enough buy-in, I think, goodwill towards Taika's work, that I think he should have the freedom to do whatever he wants.
They made a Star Wars movie with no lightsabers, It's called Rogue One. And there was a little bit of the Force in there, but very little.
No, there's a lightsaber in that movie.
Oh, yeah. Come on, Jeremy.
At the end. Okay,
yes,
fine. At the end,
yes.
there's a lightsaber.
Does that count? Same with
it does.
Solo. Solo, also, you could say 99% has no lightsaber, but then, spoiler, when guest appearance, Sith Lord, ex-Sith Lord Darth Maul arrives, he had to flash his lightsaber. Had to do it.
I hope they do. I hope they do bring the humor, because I still hold that my favorite part of The Mandalorian was the cold open to the final episode, and that was like that cops, segment. And I have spent the past 20 years just trying to get the cute factor out of my Star Wars and like get it back to being totally serious. And I'm not getting that. And so I'm just like, just got to go all in on the levity and make it fun. And so now I want them to just go all full Marvel in the Star Wars direction.
I'm hoping for the Hive of Scum and Villainy movie with him directing. So a bunch of very kind of characters set in kind of an outer rim style planet with shenanigans. It's kind of like what Solo could have been, I think. With Taika Waititi would have been interesting without
space crime.
Solo. Yeah, like something like that. The other way I was thinking, I don't think Taika Waititi is the right director for this, is like a movie set from the perspective of the Empire would be really interesting. I'm not not from like a Lower Deck style movie set from the Empire point of view, and not just for the comedic, like, oh, stormtroopers are stupid. I think there's probably a lot going on with like the war and stuff that you could tell from the Empire point of view that might be a different look that could give a lot of depth and detail.
Jar Jar Rabbit, right? That was Jojo Rabbit was from the was obviously a satire and a farce from the German perspective in World War II. But I completely agree. A Lower Decks style movie would be really fun. I was thinking if there's a chance for them, an opportunity here, if they want to retread old ground and tie in some of that nostalgia factor, to do a kind of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead style through line of the existing Star Wars story from new characters, two new characters or few unknown characters, and how they experience all the craziness, and really just point out some of the plot holes and maybe plug some of the plot holes with this behind the scenes Lower Deck style story.
You may get some of that from the Lego Skywalker series saga that's coming out. All 9 movies as one Lego game. Still, what you're describing is feels more like a TV series to me than a $200 million Hollywood film.
And that's the rub, right? When you're saying Star Wars and movie together, even in a new era where Trolls World Tour can make $100 million in VOD, and Disney Plus can put a lot of money on shows like The Mandalorian. A Star Wars movie is, as Disney says, as Disney Studios executives say, is something that should be special. And what they mean is that it's something that they're willing to invest hundreds of millions in the making of, but the return they expect would be in the billions. It needs to make that 9-figure mark.
Yeah. So how many movies are in the works? You got this one. You have Ryan Johnson's trilogy. I think Kevin Feige has said that he's working on at least one as a producer. I don't know if this is that. Like, this could be that one, the Taika Waititi one.
Right. The Game of Thrones guys, I don't think they're working on the Star Wars anymore after they have that big Netflix deal. It might just be the Ryan Johnson. Was Jon Favreau also working on one? There were a bunch of TV projects in the works that they've announced. The creator of Russian Doll we talked about last week. The director of Slight was working on, I don't know if that was a show or a movie, but that wasn't confirmed. That was the Exegol based Sith one. That one's more of a dark side story. But obviously gears are turning, and Star Wars will be forever, right? Whether we want it or not, it's going to be, they're going to make movies and TV shows.
It's just interesting that they put it on pause after Solo, and now it seems like they put it on pause, but there's a lot in the works. So like they're very certain about whatever direction they've chosen, and I look forward to seeing how this rolls out.
I think what they put on pause was the once a year release strategy. That was like the active production. I feel like that's what they put on hold, and obviously now everything's on hold, and so now is the perfect time to start just stirring the creative pot and getting ideas out there.
I'm most excited about them saying it's the end of the Skywalker saga, so brand new stories. Move forward, move way forward in time, move way backward in time, move sideways, but no more of that kind of like Jedi versus Sith centered tale. And that is really interesting. This whole series is called Star Wars, and we've only had one movie that really gets into the war aspect of all of this. So I think there's incredibly fertile ground for them to go into as they back away from this. And starting with a single movie is the right call, because I'm sure if it's super successful and it's great, they can spin it into something much bigger. But let's just start with a single movie, see what happens.
I think all these movies, the burden will be to try to create a character or characters that people fall in love with, that the characters themselves can carry a series or franchise. You
mean like a Grand Admiral Thrawn type character that they've already created?
Charisma is going to be hugely important. Something that's going to be a fan favorite, like a Han Solo. I mean, I think Mandalorian is approaching that, but it's still kind of like, we maybe Baby Yoda is maybe the better example of a character that people have fallen in love with, that we don't care what environment and what part of the universe we see the character in, but we're going to watch it. But right now it's like people want to watch Star Wars because of lightsabers, because of Jedi and Sith. It's that, and that's simply, that shouldn't just be the case. It should be on the backs of stronger characters.
Yeah, and unlike Marvel, they don't have this source material to pull from. They have to make it up, and I'll be
Well,
curious to see if they can do that to the same extent.
there's EU material, right? They could tap into Clone Wars stuff, but you're right. There's not 80 years of people imagining characters that they love in their head, and then really excited to see those characters represented on screen. Yeah. It's the problem of Star Wars. Anyway, let's move on and continue to, and I'm only delaying to get the music set up. Here we go. We're going to continue with a little bit of Star Wars and Disney as well. Disney had their big earnings call, and they made the announcement that they have 54 million Disney Plus subscribers. Sounds like an awfully big number, and obviously a lot of people signing on because of The Mandalorian, and probably more people signing on whenever they get those MCU TV shows out there. But to put that in a little bit of context, 54 million is about a quarter of what Netflix has worldwide. Netflix has 198 or something, 200 million subscribers effectively, which is an unfathomable number when you're talking about people paying, upwards of $12 or $14 a month just to watch that content. And Disney Plus obviously still ramping up its content library, though they did drop a couple new shows this week. Also in time for Star Wars Day, there was the Disney Gallery behind the scenes of the Mandalorian series. I haven't seen it yet. Have you guys?
I haven't seen it yet either. It's in the queue, and I'm excited about it. And the trailer for it makes it look just really great. Or they're going to focus on the technology behind the show.
It's a once a week episodic release. So the first episode is about directing, and it spotlights Dave Filoni and his first, real live action directing gig for The Mandalorian. And like you said, they're going to talk about the puppetry. But I think I'm going to wait till more of the episodes are released, because it really is a show that I can imagine binging. At the same time, they also dropped all 8 episodes of a show that we were very excited for, and that's the Prop Culture show starring a friend of Tested, Dan Lanigan. And this is something I've been really savoring, and I know we all watched at least the very first episode, but I want to hear your thoughts, because from my perspective, it is checking every box for a show I want to see on premium television right now.
You first, Kishore.
I mean, they might as well have just made a show as like, hey, what is Tested interested in? And just like started checking a bunch of boxes. I have to admit, though, to be a little contrarian, like I think the show is going to be driven by the movie, like the props they center on. So this first episode that I've only seen the first episode was based on some of the Mary Poppins stuff, and I'm not a massive fan of Mary Poppins. I wasn't into it. The storytelling is great, like all of those kind of components. I think when I hit an episode of a movie I love, it's going to blow my mind. Like I couldn't believe, because all of the pieces are there where they're like talking to the actual people that either worked on it or archived it, the creation process, how it's used, old archival kind of sort of footage interspliced in. Every note is kind of hit there. But I'm waiting for like the episode that's like, oh, here's the Ark of the Covenant type show where I'm be like, ah.
Well, there are a couple, and Jeremy, I want to get your thoughts on this, but the one quick thing I'll say is, if you haven't looked into it yet, the kind of elephant in the room for Disney is that Indiana Jones and Star Wars are not represented here. the 8 movies that they dive into range from things like classic Disney films like Mary Poppins to more modern ones like Pirates of the Caribbean, but even some kind of cult hits like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Tron. But yeah, I'll get into my thoughts. Jeremy, what do you think?
Well, I really need to watch the Tron episode because that's the second episode and it's the one I'm most interested in, but I thought I'd go in order. I figured, this, and I liked Mary Poppins. I actually have become a Mary Poppins fan since having kids, because when you have very young kids, there's very few films that like are just completely good natured. It's like, it's a sweet film. So I enjoyed that when my kids were little. And at the same point, like I couldn't have told you that was any of the props names. I'm not like a super fan. But I kind of feel like the strength of that show is not only like if you have a lot of emotion involved with the film and you see the props and that will mean something to you. I feel like the strength of the show is also on the people that they interview. Like they interviewed some of the original composers for the music and the choreographers and even the cast member, and there's some emotional moments. Like they actually managed to pull off like some moments where people get a little weepy. And that's very sweet to see. I enjoyed those moments. I don't feel like, and maybe this is just the first episode, but I don't feel like Dan is like a natural show host. And there's, I'm just being completely honest. Like he's clearly knowledgeable. And what I wish that the show did was sort of, explain his history a little bit better, explain like his credentials, because he's clearly been chosen because of them. And I want to know like what more about, I want to know more about him essentially. But when he's engaging with the actors and the people who were involved in the films, I didn't feel like those interviews were necessarily like what he had to bring to the show in terms of like interviewing them and eliciting information was particularly great. And there's like, especially there's this one moment that I felt was really, really cringy where he's interviewing the choreographer to the very famous dance.
Penguin
number.
dance. Yeah.
Yeah, with all the brooms, and she mentions offhand like how she longs to see one of those brooms again, and wouldn't that, like, she misses those days, and then lo and behold, he goes off stage and he comes back with a broom, like one of the actual props, and he walks up to her, and her eyes go twice as wide. She looks like she's about 80 years old, and she's this nice, kind old lady, and she asks if she can hold it, and he says no. I mean, that's who's watching this episode saying, like, don't give that broom to her. That felt mean. That felt mean spirited. I wanted more. I wanted him to give her that broom. I thought it was a gift to be handed over.
That's on the Walt Disney Archives side, right? Like, so I'm gonna take a little bit of a step back because watching the show was absolutely fascinating because we 100% know so many of these people that appear on screen. I'm saying from a Tested perspective, like going through, we're seeing friends of Tested, Fawn Davis, Phil Tippett, Brandon Allinger from Prop Store. Like these are folks that Adam and I have interviewed and know very well, including Dan. And what I really love about the presentation of this is, when they announced the show, Prop Culture, which is fantastic name, great logo. They take their spin on the Hollywood sign, Hollywoodland sign, and Prop Culture. My fear was that it was just going to be about collectors, because we've seen these shows. Like Mark Hamill did a show about like people who collect things. You've seen these kind of touring shows where they visit people's collections, and what I, honestly am much less interested by, and maybe the mainstream audience is also less interested by, are the stories of obsessive fans who just either were in the right place and time or have the money to buy something from an auction and have a piece in their collection. Like there's some, obviously, like, Peter Jackson's collection is amazing and he is someone who treasures and restores this stuff and he's creating a museum of this stuff. But a lot of the stuff, the unspoken kind of like elephant in the room, is that Hollywood does not care for the costumes and props from its golden age, and to store that stuff, only a Disney can have warehouses and the Walt Disney Archives to preserve it. And so unfortunately for so many studios, that stuff does go on the auction block, or sometimes worse yet, in the dumpster or left on location. And the interesting stories are how they then fall into people's hands. But Dan is a collector, right? It's made up front in the first episode. And it's something he brings up, that he has, over 20 years amassed a very rich collection of artifacts from films. And he's famously someone who has like the Blade Runner blaster, the actual hero Blade Runner blaster. And Adam got to visit it and compare his replica with Dan's. So he's a lover of these things. And what I think he brings to the show is a knowledge of the history of this stuff, and appreciation and respect. And also, having been a collector, he knows not only can show the excitement of fawning over an original prop, but also how to handle it, because they're entrusting him and the production company that he runs to bring things out of the archives and take them to the original concept artists, the original costume designers. And I agree, the best parts of the show are when they reconnect the artists who work on the film, and Disney, again, in a rare position where they can keep some of the very first sketches of something from Mary Poppins, and then and swatches from clothing, and bring that to someone who worked on that film 60 years ago, and then they can look at it, feel it, and say, wow, I haven't seen this piece of clothing for 60 years, and now I'm getting this flood of memories back about the creative process of designing this film. And then they also talk about the influence these films have had for multiple generations of fans.
I think the real criticism I have after one episode is what I expected. It's like the show feels like an advertisement for Disney. But like
that's Disney Plus, right?
That's Disney Plus, right? So I mean, I think that's the only thing that I walk away feeling like having a bad feeling about. I know the moment you're talking about Jeremy being a little cringy, but like it was like overall you see all this like really genuine, authentic love and appreciation for these physical objects that anchored the stories. And and I think that comes through in waves, including from Dan. So I'm excited to hear more because it like gives a richness to watching the movies. I'm really curious what it's going to be to go back and watch some of these movies after seeing these episodes, if that impacts my enjoyment of the films, knowing some of the backstories around some pretty minor props in some of these movies.
You know what?
Go ahead.
I think maybe I don't share that love and affinity for objects from movies as much as, obviously as much as Dan, but even as much as Norm or maybe even you with the Marvel films. Maybe that's why I wanted her to have that broom, and I didn't care about the sanctity of it and having it put in a museum. Like maybe that's where I'm coming from. Maybe that's my personal take on it.
And I think they do find a good balance of appreciating the physical object itself, because sometimes the objects are just off-the-shelf objects or things that are in such disarray. But I think they also tie that to the process of making those objects, the creative process and the ingenuity, and also it as a piece of film history, a reflection of the processes of that time, right? Something that was physically sculpted or hand animated versus something that was 3D printed today. They do tap. I mean, we also might be jaded because there's so much of this show that intersects with the things that we've been covering and talking about on Tested for 8 years now, is that like we take for granted for the fact that these are people we know, and these are things and places maybe we've been to, like the Lucasfilm archives or the Walt Disney archives or the prop store factory warehouse. But for the vast majority of the Disney audience and pop culture audience, it's their first time seeing this stuff. And I was so surprised with some of the stuff that I didn't know about or hadn't seen. I learned a lot from just watching this show. But prop culture, I know people wanted us to talk about it. I've been so many DMs since the show premiered last weekend. I'm like, have you seen this show? You should watch this. And I'm like, yes, I'm binging it right now. It's awesome. I think you'll like the Tron episode, Jeremy. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on that, since you are the target audience for that.
Yeah, I went to the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle, took a bunch of pictures of their costume that they have there behind glass. I am very interested in how these objects were made. So I hope that they go into that, especially that film has a lot of interesting tricks.
Totally. From Disney, we're going to talk about Netflix. Netflix had a huge success last week. They're just dropping content like crazy. They had that movie Extraction with Chris Hemsworth, written by the Russo brothers, directed by one of the stunt coordinators from the Marvel films, Sam Hargrave, I believe. And I think they said 90 million households watched that movie, which, again, if people have been paying $10 or $15 to watch in theaters, that would have equated to, a $1 billion box office in and of itself. But they also have shows that they filmed last year that were that may be timely, and they had the trailer for Space Force, the new Steve Carell show. He's on both Apple TV Plus with the morning show, and now going back to some comedy roots with Space Force. What do you guys think of this trailer?
It felt like Office Part 2, like very cringy type humor, like a return to that.
Huh.
We know Steve Carell is awesome at that, so maybe. I think the shtick of this, like the content, like that underpins this show, is going to wear off more quickly than The Office. And I think we have to find a reason to like these people. And right now, like off the bat, there was a lot of people in the trailer that I did not like.
Yeah. I think it's too real. It's too close to now. Like it feels like a SNL sketch, and I really am struggling. And maybe I'll be surprised by it. I'm struggling to imagine how they make this show last one or multiple seasons.
I mean, maybe it's not meant to be. Maybe it's something that is meant for a season.
I don't know, man. The cast is enough for me. Like Jane Lynch, John Malkovich. I will watch this absolutely just to see what they have up their sleeves and see them interact with one another.
Yeah, no shortage of talent, but also that wasn't what made The Office charming. If they're trying to recreate the magic of The Office, and it is from the creators of that show, The Office was a bunch of nobodies that their personas, their on-screen personas, weren't overshadowed by their off-screen personas.
Do you ever? I was surprised. I mean, I guess not, because it clearly is going to bring an audience out. But I was going to say I'm surprised that they've headlined from the creators of The Office so strongly, because I feel like this is very different from that. And I don't think Steve Carell would have signed up for it if it weren't at this point. Like he clearly went in the more dramatic direction after The Office in theaters, in movies. And this character that he's playing seems very, very different than the bumbling, kind of oblivious, office manager.
Well, I don't think it's the same gag for sure, but it is a manager of a department, and it's about the eccentricities of not only that department, but also his character in the sphere of politics. I mean, it reminds me a lot of Veep.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of farce that of modern politics, but without any of the edge that an HBO show like Veep or Silicon Valley brought to being a satire on those worlds.
There's some four-letter words.
Yeah,
that's
true. That's yeah.
I don't think that's what makes this thing, but it's that cringe style humor. We'll see how much you can tolerate that, because usually the cringe style stuff, until you find a character you really like, doesn't end up working over a long period of time.
Yeah. I forgot to mention in the Disney earnings report, they also talked about Disney Shanghai reopening in 4 days, guys. This is nuts.
So it can't be just like straight reopening. They must be making some pretty major changes. So like,
yes.
what are some of the changes that they're making?
So obviously it'll be lower capacity and reservation only. So it's going to be
okay. So that's how they're throttling capacity. Yeah.
You have to book the tickets ahead of time to even get in. Everything will be reservation time based. There will be, and of course, with the physical distancing. They lost $1 billion. They're writing off $1 billion because the parks have been closed in 2020, which is a massive, part of their business. The parks themselves being a massive part of the Disney business. So they feel confident enough that they can at least open it, even in some limited capacity, at least get people to buy merchandise. But I'm curious whether it'll be staffed at full capacity, and what's being done right now to kind of shape the physical, setup of the queues and of the public spaces in the park. Obviously, the pandemic has hit differently over in Shanghai, and they've recovered differently than where we're feeling right now. So it's hard to imagine something like a Walt Disney World or a Disneyland being open the same way anytime in the near future. But I think a lot of people's eyes are going to be focused on May 11th, what Shanghai Disney looks like from an attendance standpoint, from an operational standpoint, and then obviously a couple weeks down the line, whether that has any, whether those measures have any positive effect.
I mean, it's culturally different than the US, so I can't say. But I expect initially upon opening, a lot of these people will get a rebound effect of people. The pent up demand will be there pretty quickly, and then it'll level off to like whatever we're calling the new normal, at least for a period of time, or slowly build back up. I'm kind of wondering what the experience is going to be like. Yes, they're going to throttle the number of people. So then the lines, the queues, are they basically going to be gone because everything's reservation based? Or are you still going to be lining up 6 feet away from people?
I
Is
think
everyone wearing masks throughout the park?
I think the reservation system is for the actually attending the park.
And both the lines too.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they're gonna be relying more heavily on the fast pass style system rather than a 2-hour wait in a line.
Yeah, so like if they have the technology, they could have people not just wait in line anymore. They could be like, just come back here at 11:15, and then they can have only so many people in that line then, like, 15, 20 people. I think the harder question is like when you're on those rides where it's like 50 people in an enclosed room going like room to room to room, like how is that gonna operate? Are they just running those at lower capacity or what? It's one thing when you're on a roller coaster with like one other person next to you and it's somebody in your party, but it's another thing when you're in those like enclosed spaces for a long period of time. And then it's sort of like really like the thing I'm most curious about is gonna be like restaurants, bathrooms, like hours of operation. Are they going to close the park early so they can like clean them overnight? Like all that kind of stuff has to come into play. And the logistics, where we associate Disney as being the king of logistics, they're just dramatically different. And I think it's going to be interesting to watch because it might be a roadmap for a lot of public places going forward.
It looks like they've demarcated the queues themselves with ground markings. So not unlike grocery stores where they actually show you where 6 feet is, I guess the queues themselves may actually end up stretching as long, but there'll be far fewer people in them.
And I think restaurants are an easy thing to solve because they can mark off the queues, they can mark off the tables, they can manage capacity. But in terms of the shared experience of being in a theme park, what does the parade look like? What is the stuff that happens in the big public areas, the performances, right? If you're in a theater, you're watching one of those stage shows and the theater seating has to be spaced out, the energy is going to be completely different. And that's what I'm keeping an eye out for, because that will be an example of the other kind of public places and location-based experience are going to look to as well. Not just from a money operationally, can they sustain the workers and at this capacity, but what will the guest experience be like?
They'll be running at 30% capacity, which is 24,000 guests compared to the standard 80.
So it'll still feel packed.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's still a lot of people. Yeah.
I'm really curious. Again, culturally very different. Do you think there'll be 24,000 people there next week?
100%. They'll feel lucky. Yeah.
It'll be even more exclusive an experience. I mean, we saw on social media people clamoring to want to buy flights to Shanghai so they can get their Disney fix. It's, I think, jokingly so. Hopefully jokingly so, because that's not reasonable. Flights are happening once a week now, if that, and then you'd have to be under quarantine for 2 weeks. So not reasonable, practical from any measure, but it just speaks to the desire, the pent up demand that people have, not just for Disney, but to go out and go to location based.
There's a series about those people on next season's Disney Plus. Not really.
No. Okay. Not really. I was like, what are you talking about, Jeremy? I wouldn't want to watch that. Something I might want to watch, very, very interested in seeing how it develops, is the announced Borderlands film. This is being directed by Eli Roth, but also being written by Craig Mazin, I believe. Craig Mazin's doing both the Last of Us movie as well as Borderlands. What? And this is after he did Chernobyl, of course. He's in high demand. But they announced that it might be reuniting Eli Roth with one of the actors he worked with in his last movie, The House of the Clock and Its Walls, and that's Kate Blanchett. Kate Blanchett bringing
Kate
some...
Blanchett in anything, first of all, period.
Exactly.
Like, it doesn't matter. She's incredible. This is interesting. I've never been a big Borderlands player. Either of you?
No.
I did the first game. I really, really love the first game. It's one of those... It's a game that surprised me for its replayability of the co-op, right? It was a really great co-op game. You jump with a bunch of friends, and you're basically hunting for loot for the best weapons, and they have the system where the weapons are procedurally generated, and so you're always trying to get the one weapon that's +5, +4, +1 better damage or capacity than the one you had, and they have a sprawling open world and wonderfully written, kind of like really tongue-in-cheek story with memorable characters, but it's really like a Mad Max style world, so it's gonna have to be a Mad Max style movie. And my baby's crying right outside the door, so
Hi, baby.
Yeah, hi, baby. So I don't know how it translates, and Lilith is the character that Kate Blanchett would be playing. I don't know if she's in the first game, but it's a game franchise that the fans are obsessive about the visual styling of the characters. It's so many people have cosplayed the characters from the games, both male and female, and so the aesthetics will be hugely important to the success of this movie, I think.
Okay.
We had an interesting question. I'm going to use this as a little bit of a detour. I know we're also running very long, but we've been trying to take questions from our Discord. It's at discord.gg/tested. And there's this is only a test channel where people can post their questions. And we're going to try to take maybe one a week. But the question that we were asked this week by Econix says, he's interested to know what video games we think would make good movies or could be adapted in the future for better or worse. And obviously Borderlands is a video game that's going to be adapted into a movie. And the reason I wanted to answer this question is because I wanted to ask you guys, what is it about, what do you want to see from a video game movie? Or do you want to see video game movies at all?
I want to see a good movie. And if it happens to be about video games, all the better. And the one that seems to lend itself so obviously to me is Half-Life.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the right answer. I was going to go off the board. I think what's important is that with a lot of these video games, especially the longer video games, we develop real relationships with those characters. And I want to see the relationships in game being brought to life in a movie where you can have more depth, more understanding. And so it's those kinds of stories that I think can really play out in something really fantastic. The one that I'm worried about that I think if done well could be great, but it would probably be terrible, is anything Zelda related. I think that's the one where I'm super invested, but I just don't see it translating. The one that I think can really easily turn into a movie is God of War, because especially with the recent remake where it's Kratos and the kid exploring a relationship with all of like the mythology around them, going on a quest lends itself to a movie. And it's really intimate because it's really just the two of them.
So one way to look at this question is to look at the failures in video game movies in the past and what were the pitfalls. And so clearly that in the history of Hollywood, video game adaptations were greenlit and made because of the money-making opportunity, because there was already a bought-in audience, right? Familiarity with a character, not having to create new IP, means that you're assured some measure of success from the filmmaker's perspective, from the studio's perspective, which, you could say that the Mario Brothers movie wasn't great, but the name Mario allowed it to have some measure of success, right? And the same way we could say that the most successful video game adaptation so far came out this year. It's Sonic the Hedgehog, and that's a game where people is 100% familiar with the character. Now, familiarity is very different than like name and recognition is very different than the relationships that players have with the story and the characters themselves. It's in the same reason that just because you recognize, Superman doesn't mean you're going to instantly like a Superman movie, but because you've been reading, Marvel comics and Superman comics for your entire youth growing up, or playing the games because you spent 20, 30, 40 hours immersed in being the character, right? That you have an affinity for it. And that's where filmmakers can get lost in that ability to adapt that emotional connection to something that on the big screen that fits for 2 hours, as well as also making it accessible to a wider audience. They almost have to make that decision. Are we going to write a game? You can make this perfect video game adaptation that is going to service all the emotional resonance that a video game player may have with that game, right? Let's say Uncharted, right, being an adaptation coming up, and then hope that the wider audience likes it as a whole, or try to make a good movie, but then what's the point of making it a video game movie in the first place? Assassin's Creed kind of leaned toward that former one, tried to make an Assassin's Creed movie, but it wasn't really like, if it wasn't based on any video game, it would be just a kind of generic science fiction movie with not a lot of character development or resonance. It was too much tied to the hat tips and the nods to the fan service, the things that you saw that people had been experiencing through a whole franchise of video games. The other thing is, so much of people's love for video games is the gameplay, right? And we saw a lot of video game adaptations try to take that, what was unique about the genre of game, whether it was a first-person shooter, remember the Doom adaptation had the whole FPS perspective, or with a platformer or an RTS or whatever, and adapt it, and then kind of, again, have a head nod to the actual mechanics of the game being on film when it's a completely different medium and a completely different genre. And I think that always falls flat, which is why when you say Half-Life, Jeremy, is something you'd want to see, I don't know. I don't think that Half-Life works as a 2-hour story without any gameplay.
It might work better as a Witcher style miniseries. But like The Witcher wasn't going to work as a storytelling venue given how that game played. But look at what they did. I mean,
but The Witcher is an adaptation of a book series. That's more adaptation of a book series than a video game series.
I don't know what you're talking about. How could you possibly say that Half-Life would not make a good film? I'm not talking about the gameplay. Like, forget, like, I don't want to see a first-person camera. Like, the only time I've ever liked that is in Ready Player One, when they jump into, like, H fighting a first-person shooter on a planet and, like, you're first person for a few seconds. I thought that was
Doom
cool.
World, yeah.
No, I never even saw the Doom film. Like, I guess they did that. But anyway, I'm just talking about the mystery of the G-Man and opening a portal and aliens and what is the company doing, and like, using scientists and like just that whole aesthetic and seed of a plot that even Half-Life never fully develops. Otherwise people wouldn't want more. It's like they always want to know, like, unfold the mystery a little bit more.
But you just said exactly why it wouldn't make a good movie, because one of the reasons why it makes for such a compelling narrative for a game that was groundbreaking for its mechanics was the mystery, was that the writers of Half-Life could leave so much in the dark, because you would just see glimpses of aliens or of the G-Man and glimpses of what was happening in the outside world and this mystery, where that would not be satisfactory as a film, because you're going to need to answer some of those questions.
Yes.
And by themselves, just answering those questions, may satisfy those who are fans of Half-Life. But I'm thinking, like, the closest thing I can imagine, Half-Life is like The Mist combined with Die Hard.
That's pretty good. Wow.
Right? It's that's the pitch. He's a scientist, caught in this crazy cataclysmic event, time warps or space warping event. So that's Die Hard surviving that, but at the same time, it's The Mist because it's aliens and this
Yeah.
unknown and this zombie invasion.
I don't know. I don't see the problem with that combo. That seems like a good combo.
Or just make The Mist or Die Hard.
See,
Like what does Half-Life bring to that aside from the familiarity you have with Gordon Freeman?
I think
and
it brings
the
a
G-Man.
certain kind of aesthetic, like a slightly more comedic take than you would get in some of those other franchises, or slightly more lighthearted. The
Like-
problem is, like a Half-Life movie will take 20 years to develop, and like have all sorts of rumors. And in the meantime, we're gonna get like stuff like Untitled Goose Game, the movie. So
I mean,
that's the problem with
there
all
have been
this.
Angry Birds, the movie, and apparently that was people liked it, right?
It earned a sequel.
So yeah, right. So what do I know? I mean, I think if a filmmaker loves, one, you would hope that the filmmaker loves the game and has a great understanding of what they love and what fans love about the universe of the game, less so the mechanics, right? But what about the world building? What about the story compelled them, and kind of separate that love with the actual playing of the game, right? I love Warcraft, hopefully because of the mythology of orcs and humans and Azeroth, and not because I have these fond memories of playing the RTS and the intensity of surviving an RTS game or an MMO and looting and the quests, right? Because you can't replicate those experiences from a passive 2-hour story. And then when they pitch it, it's like they got to put themselves in the position. I'm sure, even Gary's had this, has gone through this many, many times of pitching to studios where they would have to pitch it almost in a vacuum. Like, what about this story and this perspective and this take on a video game story sounds like it's going to be a good movie without the benefit of it being a video game movie. Because if you rely on the benefit of it being a licensed property and the familiarity of an Angry Birds or a Sonic, then I think you're already pigeoning you're working on a handicap creatively.
Well, it certainly makes you wonder how Angry Birds and Sonic ever got made.
Kids, man.
As you said, both very successful films.
Yeah.
How about this? Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe it's a series. Maybe it's a TV series. Now they have to. I mean, the cartoon when I was a kid was one of my absolute favorites. It was a good show.
Love the cartoon. Yeah.
And so I'm thinking they could certainly bring that back. Live action, TV series, 10 episodes.
And the thing about Dungeons and Dragons is there's no one character to lock onto. There's no set of characters. You have classes of characters. And so what does that mean for something that is a character-driven story? Can it be done? Yes.
Yes. I think you don't call it Dungeons and Dragons. Like, the best video game movies end up being the ones that aren't the actual quote-unquote video game movies, but the fans feel like, wow, that's what I'd want to see out of that game, right? It's in the same way Galaxy Quest is the best Star Trek film for some people. It's like, it's the best Star Trek film because it's not Star Trek, but it taps into all these archetypes that we love from the Star Trek universe. You can say, like, Logan, even though that's a licensed, Wolverine story, Logan's the best Last of Us film, or The Road was the best Last of Us film. It's because it's all cyclical. Everything is a remix, right? The Last of Us is a riff off of the post-apocalyptic, Cormac McCarthy, The Road style story, and then Logan is a riff on that as well. So you could say, like, okay, like Indiana Jones, that's the best. That's what I want to see out of a Uncharted movie. Well, that's because they reference each other, right? And maybe it's I'd rather see a good movie that evokes all the feelings of a franchise without necessarily needing to have the franchise name or those characters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that satisfies the question a little bit. We got last couple more things in the pop culture section. Hey, Tom Cruise is going to space?
Is he?
Tom Cruise is going to die in space?
Is he?
So we have very little information about this outside of a tweet from NASA's Jim Bridenstine, who heads the agency, who indicated they are working with Tom Cruise to shoot some sort of project aboard the ISS. And right now, there's no film studio attached as far as the reporting has gone. And there was some early reporting indicating SpaceX is involved as well. My big question is, like, why do you need to do this? Like, outside of like NASA's position, or at least Jim Bridenstine's position, was like, storytelling in space will inspire a whole next generation of scientists and engineers around NASA's missions. Okay, but like, I watched Gravity a couple weeks ago, which is set aboard the ISS. That movie looks perfect. I watched Apollo 13 a couple weeks ago. They shot that aboard the Vomit Comet, so you got the zero G effects. I'm not clear, like, what needs to be shot in space that you can't get from shooting on Earth.
But that's honestly, the Tom Cruise story. Like, every movie he does things that could have been done a lot safer and a lot easier and a lot more traditionally, but he does them for real. And you're supposed to know that going into the films, apparently. And that's part of the appeal of seeing these live stunt people do these things on film.
I absolutely hate this idea, for the record.
And this is, it's not like NASA hasn't filmed on the ISS, for documentaries before.
Yeah.
They have RED cameras on there. They have the gear, and anyone who's kind of seen that footage realized, yeah, it's amazing, because you realize intellectually, it's not CG, it's filmed in space. But the ISS is not cinematically lit, and it's cramped as hell, and it's unromantic in all the ways that space films want to romanticize space exploration. It's boring. So you're asking astronauts to be cinematographers, and they're incredibly talented, but and they have that. I'm not worried about the time commitment, right? It's they have Chris Hadfield shot his music video in space, and that is incredible. Or the technology. It's like, what is it, like you said, Kishore, what does it bring to a story, and how could you write a story that would make good use of it and not just be a 15-minute gimmick as part of it?
Also, just fundamentally, I'm not into the idea of sending unqualified people to space. All due respect to Tom Cruise. Like, we send astronauts that have been through training and vetting and a selection process to space to do specific activities. I don't think Tom Cruise is going through like all of those things to get there. He's like shortcutting. He'll end up shortcutting a bunch of steps. And it's like, if Tom Cruise proves out that he can run scientific experiments on the ISS and advance other missions, great, I'm on board. Sign Tom Cruise up that he can do all of these things. But all of this just smacks as a use of a public resource for like a very bizarre, unnecessary set of storytelling. I am very deeply irritated by this story.
There's no promise that he's going to be the one going to space anyway, right? He could just be producing it, or his company's working with them, or be a film where he's on Earth and the footage is in space. Like, the biggest disappointment that I think making this announcement so early is that it might just come out that they're going to be sharing some footage, but there's none of this extravagant stunt and costly him going to space that people are expecting. I mean, the guy's pushing 60, right? And think about it this way.
He's a young man compared to that woman who didn't get the broom.
Thank you,
Jeremy. You're not over it. You're not over the broom moment.
Let me think of it this way. Okay. Tommy Lee Jones in Space Cowboys was younger than Tom Cruise is now. Right. So, yeah, I make your Mission Impossible movies. Like, I am all for sometime in the future. Like, and I maybe will be surprised by the way they're employing, the cinematography. But like, undoubtedly, there's opportunities to film interesting documentary style footage in space and eventually narrative. But I don't think it needs to be on. Now might not be the right time, or I can't fathom a creative angle that is actually going to feel exciting from an action film.
I think Kishore's got his head screwed on straight here. I think he's got the right perspective, but But I have always, since I could remember, wanted to go to outer space, and I know I'm not alone, and I know I'm not going. And it's so if I can vicariously send Tom Cruise up there and be up there sort of through him and sort of say, okay, there's a civilian up there who went up that I recognize. For that moment, maybe there's something there. Maybe that's part of it, and it may inspire children, to maybe it'll inspire 100 kids to look at NASA as a career that wouldn't have otherwise, and that's a good thing. So I don't know. It's not all bad. We'll see.
Like the idea of that sounds great, but there should be like some sort of selection process for it, not just like Tom Cruise sounds good, let's do that. Like that's the part of what you're talking about that chaps my head.
I mean, Richard Garriott did it already. And if you're talking about inspiration, that was a super nerd video game designer who got to go to space. Let that be your inspiration, right? Learn to code, be creative.
I forgot he did that. He didn't go on the ISS, did he?
Yeah.
He went on the ISS?
Yes.
Wow.
Lord British of Ultima. I mean, obviously, he comes from a family of people connected to space, and there's a legacy there. But yeah,
I hate all of this. I hate all of this so much.
You're jealous.
Worst. No, I'm not jealous. I don't deserve to go to space. I don't want to go. I should not go to space. No one should ever put my name on any list of people being considered to go to space. Ever.
Okay.
Noted.
Okay. I ordered the ISS Lego kit.
Oh, I have that too. Adam put together. Did you buy the lighting kit as well? There are a couple lighting kits out in the world.
I did not, but I did order the one for the Apollo 11 lander.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. I think both of those work well with lighting kits, especially in the dark, because that's what they had on the actual ISS and Apollo lander. Video games, real quick. Billy Mitchell back in the news. What's going on? Who's he suing now?
Hot sauce convention? What's going on?
Well, I didn't add this story, but I did brush up on it. Apparently, like we knew that Twin Galaxies said that his scores were just bunk, right? He did not deserve to win those scores. That he cheated. The VHS tapes had been tampered with, and apparently, like he threatened to take it to court, and apparently he did. Like this is not something that just happened. Apparently he brought it to court almost a year ago, and I guess just didn't make a big deal of it. And now it's been discovered that there's a lawsuit filed, and he's trying to get his name cleared as Donkey Kong champion #1.
Okay. All right. Well,
good for you.
Yeah. A good way to spend your quarantine time is fighting for those high scores. Speaking of high scores and video games, this is a really fun story on Gizmodo. They shared a video, it's a YouTube video of a 1970s, is that 77? Yeah, 1977 game called Blip from Tommy. And it's a Pong clone that's a wind-up mechanical game.
Oh, my God.
So,
oh, my God.
Jeremy, I know. I knew this story was for you. The YouTube video is great because the people who made the video, Tech Tangents, they show the playing of the game, and then they kind of X-ray with a composite of what the mechanism looks like beneath this handheld. So the handheld has like these two dials, one on the left side and right side, and it's a wind-up game. So you turn this timer dial, and then underneath there are no batteries, no electronics. What you get is a mechanical arm that swings back and forth with a system of gears that actually replicates the game of Pong.
Okay, but you're not explaining how the gameplay actually works. You don't have a paddle that analog moves left and right. You have 1, 2, and 3 on either side of the board. And the ball only goes to one of those 3 spots.
Right.
And you have to determine, I suppose, in a matter of, a half second, which is about the time it takes for the ball to travel the whole field, which one it's going to go to. And I can't tell if there's a pattern or not. there can't be a pattern.
It has to be. I mean, there has to be a pattern. How do you randomize that? Because you have these nested gears
Yes.
in the same way you would have like an astrolabe.
You're
right?
saying
And
mechanically there has to be a pattern, but I'm saying from a gameplay standpoint, there can't be a pattern. So I wonder which one it is.
there must be a long sequence of pattern. Right?
Yeah.
In the size of the gears and the offsets, and maybe there's some, maybe it's something that could be changed with some, notching system. But you're right. From a gameplay perspective, you wouldn't want a pattern, especially since there are only 3 spots and it needs to be a game. But it's just mesmerizing to watch this lever hold this ball, go left and right, and hit in essentially one of 6 places in its orbit.
This is awesome.
It's available on eBay. Prices have gone up considerably since this video went up yesterday.
Wait, there's one? There's
No.
one
There are many. There are many, but they're mostly sold out. Before the video went up, and Gizmodo posted the story, and I'll embed the video or link it in the description of the podcast. They're going for about $20 working versions, but now like $100. But I want to see this in action in person.
Oh man,
it's called Blip, the digital game, even though it's completely analog.
All right, it's going on my Christmas list.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, before we move on to our next section in this, holy crap, long podcast already, I want to let you know that this is only a test. This week is made possible by Postmates. We've been trying to support our local businesses here and doing doing takeout and delivery a lot during this lockdown and quarantine period, and I have been really enjoying using Postmates. I really like them right now because I can get food delivered without leaving the house or even opening the door, and given what's going on in the world, they've created non-contact deliveries. So right now when I order from local restaurants, everything gets left right outside my door. They also have Postmates pickup, so you can order takeout from your favorite local restaurants. Listen up, you guys need to be supporting your neighborhood spots right now. And it's a great opportunity to discover the spots, not only support the places that you have loved doing takeout and delivery from for a long time, but finding new spots in your neighborhood. And Postmates doesn't just deliver burgers and sushi. They can make your life easier by picking up everything you need from Walgreens, 7-Eleven, or whatever shops that you shop at, and dropping it right outside your door. Just download the Postmates app on iOS and Android, find your favorites, and get anything you want delivered within the hour. Now, for a limited time, Postmates is giving listeners $100 of free delivery credit for your first 7 days. To start using your free deliveries, download the app and use the code ONLYATEST. That's only a test for $100 of free delivery credit for your first 7 days when you download the Postmates app. Anything you need, anytime you need it, Postmate it. And now we move on to... Give me a second. Where's the theme? Here it goes. Got some big updates from both Microsoft and Apple this week on their mobile side. So we'll start with the Microsoft news first. They, as rumored, they have announced the Microsoft Surface Go 2. If you recall, on the Surface laptop line, they have the Surface Pro, which is the x86-based tablet/laptop. You buy the type cover to make it a laptop. It's essentially a laptop in a tablet form factor. There's the Surface Laptop, which is itself a straight up laptop with the same materials, but you can't disconnect the keyboard, and you have no hinge in the back. There's the Surface Book, which is their high-end, their MacBook Pro competitor. That's the one with a detachable hinge, and it's all kind of metal. And then there's the Surface Go, which is really their iPad competitor. It's like the Surface Pro, but cheaper and less powerful. The new Surface Go has a bigger screen, 10.5-inch screen, up from 10 inches, and it has a high resolution. So it's 1920 by 1280. 3:2 aspect ratio, which I really like on these devices, not 16:9. And it uses an Intel 8th gen Core M3 processor. So it's Pentium, the Intel's Pentium mobile processor. So base price is $400. And the higher M3 model is $630, 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage. So still x86, and then their type covers are $100 to make it into a laptop form factor. Good for education, and they were reviewed pretty well when they first came out. There's also a new Surface Book. This is their high-end MacBook Pro competitor, and this just is a spec update in the 2020 models. They have a 13.5 inch and 50 inch, same as last year. Spec updates include NVIDIA discrete graphics, so they have now a GTX 1650 Max-Q on the 13 inch and a 1660 Ti on the 15 inch. Not going to be great for gaming, but good for rendering, and enterprise customers can use a Quadro RTX, so it's going to be good for your 3D modeling. And those are way more expensive, so the highest configuration on those are like $2,700, and they use the new Intel 10th gen mobile processors. They also have some new Surface headphones and new Surface earbuds coming out, $200 and $260, I want to say. And those are the big updates on the Surface line. Mac's also got an update, the new MacBook Pro. It was long rumored to get a bigger screen. So just like the 15-inch MacBook Pro went up to 16-inch over the holidays last year, people were expecting the 13-inch MacBook Pro to get a 14-inch screen, but nope, staying at 13-inch. But now it's using the new 10th gen processors, as well as finally the removal of the butterfly keyboard. So there are no more Macs being sold with the butterfly keys. They all go back to the new Magic keys, which are scissor switch keys. So that's the big mobile update on laptops and the like. What else we got? Steven Sinovsky. Do you remember who Steven Sinovsky is?
No.
He ran Windows back, God, for so long. But most importantly and most memorably during the Windows 7 and Windows 8 eras. So this was right when Windows, at the peak of Windows, Windows 7, and right when iOS and the iPhone was becoming a thing, and Microsoft scrambled to transition to something to compete with the iPhone with Windows 8. And he's working on a book called Hardcore Software: Inside the Rise and Fall of the PC Revolution. And he did an interview in Fast Company about, looking back at his time at Microsoft and what it was like when Microsoft was feeling this kind of sea change with iOS and with mobile, and how they, failed to have a response to the iPhone, essentially. He's still working on the book. There aren't like excerpts or anything, but the one thing I want to call out was he says the challenge. He says that when he was there, something that always happens, and it's happening right now, is there's always someone in some company, some startup, or some analyst saying that there's going to be a sea change, that the next thing is right around the corner. And we only remember the times when the actual next things came, because not of the technology, but because of the matching of the timing of the market and the technology. So the iPhone, and not even the iPhone, going back to when Windows and Office was a success, it was a success not because those were the first desktop OSs or the first productivity tools, but because the marketplace was perfectly primed for those tools to be ready and those technologies to be ready for a company like Microsoft to take advantage of them. And same for Apple for things like the iPhone. And I think what he's talking about really applies to when we're thinking about virtual reality, and most recently augmented reality with what's happened at Magic Leap. Because for AR, absolutely, regardless of how good the technology is right now, there's a misalignment between the technology and what the market will bear, and what people want to use, and what people are willing to use and pay for. And we're all wondering whether that is the case for VR as well. VR being now well into its 4th year of having, the Rift and the Vive and it being in the marketplace. And there are a lot of articles that have come out from all sorts of naysayers saying, even in the wake of Half-Life Alyx and, a million new VR users being added to Steam, VR is kind of by itself in this corner and not growing at the rate that it needs to grow at, whatever that means. Jeremy, thoughts?
I mean, I just think it's unfair. Specifically about VR, because you have this completely mature video game industry, which is bigger than the movie industry now. When I was a kid, video games were this tiny little segment of the entertainment industry, and if you sold, nobody sold 1 million copies of any game. It was like you measured success slightly differently. And I think that we kind of just have to enjoy this early phase of VR with the same kind of perspective as the early days of computing. And so it's not going to compete with Uncharted and PlayStation yet. It's not going to be like a Nintendo Switch anytime soon, even Quest, It's but it is certainly, I think it's clearly reached a point where it has stuck, and we're just going to slowly incline until, it gets
Reaches
more,
the hockey stick moment, right?
I don't know if we'll get to a hockey stick moment anytime soon, honestly. Like, things have got to get way lighter and more comfortable and affordable, and the resolution's got to go up, field of view, all this stuff. We can't have tracking issues.
So there's a couple disconnects there. There's a disconnect between investor expectations, and that's absolutely true, right? When people were investing and overhyping VR 5 years ago, 6 years ago, all the projections were looking to not even the video game industry, but looking to the smartphone market and looking, if we could even capture 1% of what the smartphone market, then it's going to be this billion-dollar industry, and we're nowhere even near there, right? And so that mismatched expectation, but that kind of also, was that needed for the investment to be made in developers and in hardware to get through?
You mean those promises?
Those promises and that those kind of unrealistic expectations to get through the early growing pains. And the second disconnect is the disconnect between what's being advertised right now, in VR, with it being consumer ready versus enthusiast ready, right? Clearly it's enthusiast ready. And clearly anyone, and the bar for enthusiasts is always lowering, because it's, it's easy to be enthusiast gamer or early adopter, way easier to be that now than it's ever been, because of all the supplemental media around it, right? Like building a PC 20 years ago to make you an enthusiast, that bar was much higher. It's much lower now to be more than just a console gamer, and the market's bigger too. But is there a mismatch between that expectation of it being a mainstream gaming platform or a computing platform or a social networking platform, and where the VR, where, like, as you say, it still needs to slowly grow before we eventually hit a hockey stick moment?
I don't know. I don't know what the expectations are on the part of the investors at Facebook. Valve has no investors, so I don't know. It's just as long as expectations are in line with reality, I think we're going to do fine. It's just going to take more time, and I have no problem with that. Because right now the generation to generation leap is so much more interesting in VR than it is anywhere else. In cell phones or computers, we're seeing like the early console day leaps and bounds in resolution and capabilities and in just technical tech capabilities than we have in any other segment right now. And I think that's exciting, and that does also speak for the improvement in experience, generation to generation, and which will result in higher sales. But I don't know about a hockey stick moment anytime soon.
Yeah, and then if you make the analogy to either video game consoles or mobile hardware, right? It's not, when we saw NES to SNES to N64, right? Those are big jumps every generation. But even the very first NES was a mass market device that had more penetration than VR has now. So are we not talking about, we're not even in the NES era, but we're still in the Commodore and Atari era, where it was, available to mass market, but still felt a little more niche. In the same way that when we're talking about mobile hardware, we're not talking about iPhone 1 to 3G to 4, in which every device there was a massive performance leap and brought new things in user experience. But we're in the Pocket PC, Windows CE, and Palm Pilot days, where it was available to mass market, but it was really an enthusiast product.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. If that's what you think, I would agree with you.
Yeah, we're Palm Pilot days, not iPhone 1 days, and we're waiting for the iPhone 1 moment. And I think it's probably closer than we think. I think I don't think even the Quest is the iPhone 1 of VR.
I don't think the next Quest will be either. I mean, who knows? But
Yeah.
I think we're a ways away.
All right. I'm gonna get through a bunch of these tech stories relatively quickly. Intel has released its 10th gen desktop processors now. Again, these are the Comet Lake processors, and they also have a Skylake S, which is their past gen but more cores, 10 cores, and 5.3 gigahertz. But they're really pushing, like as we discussed in past weeks, on the mobile side, the just the frequency that they can push on these, because they're still on a 14 nanometer plus process, as opposed to a 10 nanometer, which they've moved to on the ultra portable side. On the desktop side, you're not worried about that power, and you're worried more about what the reliability. And so those chips are out now. And
to be clear, the 10th gen mobile processors have been in laptops for almost a year now. Like they were in they were in Dell's 9 months ago.
Right, but those weren't, and on the Intel side, those were still. They didn't move on to the 10 nanometer process until more recently. And it's a different strategy because, from a fabrication standpoint, AMD with the Ryzen stuff has been on 7 nanometer, of late. And that's been doing real well on the mobile side. And while they're not pushing as high frequencies and clock speeds, they're getting a lot more performance per watt. And when you look at rumors of Apple going to their own ARM-based desktop chips, the rumors were last week that it would be a 5 nanometer process. So Intel definitely has a lot of room to grow, and maybe they're going to surprise us after they're done with this 14 nanometer plus generation. More computer stuff. Speaking of some I/O, the spec for USB 4 is out, and it will include DisplayPort 2, support up to 8K HDR monitors. USB 4 is confusing because USB is confusing. I could not, if you put a gun to my head, tell you difference off the top of my head between all the USB 3 versions after things had been renamed. 3, 3.1, 3.2, Gen 2, all that stuff. Hopefully the USB 4 will be a reset of the renaming. But it's 40 gigabits per second, DisplayPort 2.0, and the ports will be backward compatible, of course, with the existing USB.
With 3. Will it support all the different ports that USB has now?
I don't know what the ports will be. Presumably there'll be a Type A port and a Type C port. I can't imagine they're going to have a mini Type B port because the USB 3 mini was such a debacle. That's the one that the long and the short connected, where the long was USB 2 essentially, and that extra nub made it a USB 3. It's what's in essentially most USB 3 cameras and portable hard drives before USB-C became a standard, and which itself had its own problem. This Raspberry Pi, speaking from the most powerful computers, we're talking about the most basic computers. Raspberry Pi has a new update. It's a camera update. There's going to be a interchangeable camera lens, a camera sensor with support for interchangeable lenses.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild looking. Like the actual sensor itself doesn't look much different than the original Raspberry Pi camera, which is basically a tiny little cell phone sensor soldered onto a circuit board
with a long ribbon cable for the input, right?
Which connects to the proprietary ribbon cable connector on the Raspberry Pi. So it's a way to take advantage of like the built-in video decoding on the Raspberry Pi without taking up a USB port. It's very handy. I use one on my 3D printer, but this new one basically has a huge plastic connector, so you can attach a lens onto it. Once you have a lens on there, it's as big as the Raspberry Pi. It's pretty fantastic looking, and I can't wait to see what the quality is like.
So
But
it uses.
if you're somebody that has a bunch of spare lenses around, I don't know who in our podcast that could be. This could be an interesting test.
And it is a bigger camera sensor. I mean, relatively speaking, it's using a Sony 12 megapixel sensor, which is higher than the original 8 megapixel one. And the mount it's going to be a C mount, which is standard in film industry for 16 millimeter cameras. C mount and CS mount. I don't have any C mount cameras. I think it's also the same as what you would use for like security cameras lenses. So there's no shortage of those lenses, and you can do things like change focus, change focal distance, just to make your projects that much more versatile. Apple has announced its virtual WWDC this year. It's going to be free to attend, focused on developers, of course, and it will be on June 22nd online. Not much more we can say for that, except that, again, I think we talked about last week, if Apple is planning to do a major transition off of x86 to ARM on the desktop side or the laptop side, they would hopefully not make it a surprise. They can make the hardware a surprise, but this would be the time to talk about it at this WWDC and allow developers to start porting their applications. It would obviously be a big shakeup for their suppliers, and I could see Intel stock taking a big dip if this was to be announced. But they would have to, they can't just say, here's a new MacBook with ARM support, and we've been working with 12 developers or X number of developers privately under NDA to do this. They got to open it up to all the developers way ahead of time if this is something happening next year.
When they switched to Intel, Steve Jobs got up on the stage and brilliantly, as always, said that we don't just have the most recent version of OS X working on Intel. We have the last 5 versions of OS X all running on Intel. Like they've always had this skunkworks office with engineers keeping the OS, running currently on Intel in case they ever wanted to make the jump. So I would hope that they would be just as thorough, and if they make the leap to ARM, that they will have everything running and have had everything running for a very long time.
And that's, I think everyone expects that to be the case, and people have kind of confirmed privately to people in the know that is the case. I don't know how they'll present it, on stage, whether it'll be with as much flourish as Steve Jobs did, but that confidence, I think, should be there whenever they make this announcement. Something I speculated about a couple weeks ago is what would Apple do with Face ID once, everyone's wearing masks? And we got an answer sooner than I thought. It's just going to be a software update. Apparently, Face ID will still be the normal thing, and the expectation is whatever they had plans for the next iPhone, Face ID will be the way to unlock it. It's not like they're going to bring back Touch ID because of the pandemic and people wearing masks, but they're making it easier to switch from Face ID to entering your passcode to make it a shorter delay, so you can swipe up to enter your passcode and swip that delay. So you bring up your phone and swipe up to enter your passcode. Right now, you can, even if you don't have the software update, when it says the word Face ID on your phone, you can tap that, and that will bring up the keypad for you to type in your passcode. So a little more of an inconvenience, but it's just an Apple way of saying deal with it, because their hope is, of course, the face mask thing won't be long-term, won't be the next 3 or 4 years. Who knows? Last bits of video game news. Ubisoft announced the new Assassin's Creed. It's Valhalla, so they're going Nordic, and it's going to be, assassins set in Norse history with Vikings and stuff. And
all right, I haven't played an Assassin's Creed game in ages, but I'll bet it's going to look good.
They've done Greek history. They've done, they're basically pure fantasy games now, right? They've done pirates. They've obviously done Italian, the Renaissance, and so they're just kind of globe-trotting around the world, tapping into different cultures. Something that was really cool, though, to announce the game, they did a live stream that was like multi-hours long. I don't know exactly how long, but then artists capture the screen and digitally paint concept art from the game.
Okay.
And people watched it, and it slowly unveiled the time period and the era and the culture in which the game would take place. I thought that was neat.
You kind of buried the lead. It's this holiday for Xbox Series X and PS5.
So that was my next thing. With no E3 going on, I know there are some the game publishers are still going to be making announcements, and they're going to be doing these, virtual press conferences strung back to back to back. But Microsoft says they're still planning on launching the Xbox Series X this year. And the assumption is that's going to be a race with PS5 as well, because they want by holiday season, they want to make sure they can get something on store shelves.
PlayStation already said they're going to have to limit the number of units produced. I wonder if we're going to hear a similar announcement from Microsoft in the coming weeks.
PlayStation,
I can't imagine.
They said that they were going to intentionally limit because they felt like there wouldn't be the demand.
See, I think there's got to be supply chain things too.
I would expect there to be too, but the way they're spinning it is it's their strategy.
I don't know. Doesn't it seem like this is the time there would be a high demand for video game systems? I mean, every metric seems to be going in the right direction for video games.
It's just disposable income.
No, I mean, I get what you're saying, but it's like I'm a little surprised that that's the spin they're going with.
And maybe the demand is skewed toward mobile, right? Like mobile gaming definitely on the rise, and Switch gaming on a massive rise. But spending hundreds of dollars, $400+ whatever it'll cost for a dedicated next-gen console plus the games to support it, there might be a little less appetite for that. I think there's an opportunity here for Google to jump in, and NVIDIA for their streaming game stuff. And obviously Sony and Microsoft have plans for that as well. But we haven't seen either of them I think they're more bracing for supporting the current player base and getting through increased usage now than trying to fast track new features. And even if they do, we wouldn't see those announcements for a little while. Okay, that does it for technology news. Let's move on to
Now it's time for a moment of science.
So Apple and Google released some more information about the API they're co-developing that they are now calling, what's the actual name here? It is Exposure Notification API, which was renamed from Contact Tracing API. So first, a qualification. Every expert that I hear talking out there, every other country in the world, talk about technology being something that helps with efficiency with contact tracing, but it's not the leader in it. Like, we still need boots on the ground to track when somebody develops the cases and track back who else they might have infected. And generally, phone calls, knocks on the door, that's the way this is going to get done. But this can help with scale. It can help at the periphery in a lot of ways. They've set forth some of their first policies on it, and they're fairly stringent, I think. One is that there's only going to be one app per country that has access to the API, so there isn't fragmentation. Two, there's multiple levels of user consent that goes through this. So one, the user has to consent that the API is being used at all. Then it has to consent to receive or to share a positive test result before broadcasting any information. They're going to restrict access to any location-based data. So you can't, through this API, request access to any geographic location. They're only going to, they're going to limit the amount of information you can access generally. And there is severe restrictions on gathering any information used for anything like advertising or non-COVID related purposes. So this feels stringent. They say they're still on track to release this API by mid-May, which is I don't know, next week. So I'll be curious if they're on track and what this turns into development around the country. A lot of public health agencies are already using apps that, and some have geolocation capabilities to them. So I think this is just sort of an augmentation to that. Again, this is not like a panacea. This isn't going to be the dominant thing, but I think you're going to hear a lot of news about this when the API comes out next week. All right, I'm going to keep it short this week. Next week, what I want to do is a listener Q&A episode. The Discord is starting to fill with some general questions people have. So I'd like to do just a full-on, let's just answer any question you have about COVID next week. So start generating those questions. I want to talk about the models, what they say might be the pathways forward. And there's a few different scenarios that seem to be kind of aligning right now. These models aren't meant to be predictive about numbers of deaths or anything else like that. They're tools to make public policy decisions. And there seem to be three scenarios that are emerging. So one is that we have a rolling set of what we call mini waves after this. So we went through like a peak period right now. In a lot of cases, some here in the US, some of those areas are still at that peak. In others, it's sort of been a slow decline. But one of the scenarios is that we're constantly at this kind of steady state where there's thousands of cases at any given time. And that period can go from anywhere from 12 to 24 months and will only really be ended when a vaccine or a really big therapeutic comes on. So it just becomes this background thing that just exists. There's always a few thousand cases. There's always people in the ICU. There's always people kind of contracting and unfortunately dying from this disease over that long period of time. That's kind of like what I would consider sort of an optimistic scenario, because it's the kind of scenario that you can return to a lot of functions of society outside of like large gatherings and feel somewhat comfortable. But it's going to be this sort of strange period where you constantly feel like coronavirus is a thing for 24 months that is in the background. The second scenario is what's generally referred to as the 1918 scenario, which is that we go through this peak, it comes down, and then we have a massive peak in the fall. That's exactly what happened in the 1918 flu epidemic. We have measures that should limit what that looks like. This time around, there's better communication, there's better tools, there's a better understanding of what leads to that. But as we're having discussions of reopening, there's always the potential that we could go into, especially this fall, a massive peak again, where cases just really flare up. And I think part of the concern that's driving that model is this fall we'll have another flu season at the same time that coronavirus is still going around. We don't know how big of a flu season that will be. But if the flu season and coronavirus come together in a way that amplify cases, we could see a pretty large peak and a lot of people getting sick at once and overwhelming healthcare capacity pretty quickly. I don't think this scenario is well favored by most epidemiologists that I follow, but it's a possibility. And the third is that we have something that's more sort of localized with lots more peaks and valleys. So like Detroit's going to have an outbreak for a period of time and then come down. And then maybe like Wyoming's going to have a peak and come up and down. And so we see these peaks and valleys that are kind of spread geographically, where you go through these higher peaks. And when you go through those higher peaks, probably those locations are going to go through some period of the kind of like shelter in place type orders for a period of time and then open back up. So it's the kind of like rubber band effect. Those are the three most common scenarios. They all have different consequences to what daily life looks like for us. And it could be something completely different from all of those things, but those are the scenarios that are most often being discussed. What I think is most likely, based on the discussions, is something that like is probably in between all of these. It's not going to perfectly look like all of those scenarios, but it's going to probably have elements of both. I think there's a lot of reason to believe if we continue to restrict travel, we're going to see something similar to the last scenario where we have peaks and valleys. And there may be communities that have to go through like a shelter in place and come back out. Just because, and I'm speaking about the US specifically, just because we don't have the testing infrastructure and the contact tracing infrastructure that would give us a lot of confidence that we'd tamp that down. I hope I'm wrong, but I think that's what I'm starting to prepare myself for, is this idea that I'm going to go into this rebound effect where there's going to be a lot of back and forth with how this is. And there'll be periods, and the fall is one of those periods where we might have to be more stringent as people go back out, and we'll have to rebound forth. And people, as we go farther along, are probably going to be less likely to obey shelter in place and social distancing as time goes on. It's just sort of a natural course of action. And that's sort of built into some of this thinking. And so I think that's a lot of where I am sort of, that's a lot of where my head is right now based on what we're hearing. All of this is very fluid. All of this is based off of theory and projections on what we're seeing in other countries, what we're seeing early now. So this will all dramatically change. But that's kind of where some of the behind the scenes thinking of a lot of epidemiologists is right now. I wanted to address one last thing that came up. There was a big LA Times story that suggested there was a new strain of coronavirus going around, of SARS-CoV-2. And it specifically references this mutation on the spike protein, if you recall me talking about a few weeks ago. And it's the D164G 4G mutation. What this paper that the LA Times story is based on said was basically like when we do the genetic analysis of the virus as it first appeared in Wuhan versus the one that is largely spreading in North America and Europe and other places right now, there's been a mutation on that spike protein, and it's a different one, and it might be more contagious than the previous one. Science aside, really what that translated to is there's a new strain going around, and it's super contagious, and that's just not true. As far as we know, right now, from looking at all of the genetics on this, and you can go to sites like NextStrain, which I've referenced before, there's one dominant strain there of virus that is largely everyone is encountering right now. So there's one type of protein on that, one spike protein that everyone is largely seeing. There has been a mutation in that spike protein from what originally was in Wuhan, but we are not seeing any differences in transmissibility or death figures. We haven't done that kind of control. So we don't have any evidence that this mutation is operating any differently than the one previously that we saw in Wuhan. And there isn't multiple strains transmitting. And then the word strain itself is a weird scientific term that doesn't really mean anything. Viruses undergo a lot of mutations all the time. And even mutations in things like the proteins that help enter the cell, those mutations don't always translate into like a different functional form of how the virus operates. And so typically we use the term strain when we see a real functional difference in how the virus operates. So like flus from year to year have different strains because they like physically operate differently, and that's why different vaccines have to be developed for them. The coronavirus that we're seeing, SARS-CoV-2, is mutating at a rate 10 times less than a typical flu virus mutates. So it's unlikely that we're going to see a new strain of this develop based on its mutation rate right now, its natural mutation rate right now. This is, again, early evidence, but I think a lot of the hype around that LA Times story has been tamped down by epidemiologists. That's it for me. Always the good news.
Sorry, I had myself muted because there was a baby screaming. How much of this, I know you said you talked about this as mostly framed around the US, but has there been talk about what operating procedures will be like between countries, even whether it's US and the rest of the world, or even between countries that that have maybe flattened the curve or better states than we are?
I mean, heck, even within countries, we're going to have this conversation of what internal travel looks like, because California, giant state, has largely had a pretty flat curve. If we have a pretty open travel between New York, let's say, which is still quite the hotspot in California, how does that impact long-term trajectory of the virus? Uh, the the short answer is we don't know. There's still 2-week travel bans, or 2-week shelter in place restrictions for a lot of travel between these countries. I think that's going to persist for a fairly long period of time as a measure of control. But I also think the other thing that we're discounting is I just don't think we're going to see demand for that kind of travel. And that's going to actually deeply influence what we see in terms of the policies as well. Even with rebound effects of people being like, I want to go here to visit friends and family I haven't seen much. I think you're going to see travel on such a decline, even domestic travel, even over the summer when people are usually traveling, that we're going to see more limited impacts than what we'd seen before. But at the end of the day, if people are using some of the public health measures, like wearing a mask, and I'm going to start from wearing a mask, keeping physically distant, washing hands really regularly, even with that travel, we're going to see some pretty reduced transmission rates. If there's infrastructure to test all of that, I think you could see a more thoughtful, coordinated, curated set of decisions. But I think what we're going to see in the short term, and by short term I mean the next 6 months, is just 2-week shelter in place for anyone traveling between countries.
All right. And then non-pandemic science news. This one, space exploration. NASA unveiled, I guess it had been in the works for a little bit, but that as a part of the next Mars rover, the Perseverance, that there would be a potential, and I guess this is still hopefully on track, a helicopter drone.
It's a
that would be
quadcopter. Yeah.
It's not a quadcopter. It's two propellers stacked on top of each other.
Oh, fair enough. But it's like a drone, right? It's like
Yes.
it's almost like DJI made something that looked like a NASA device.
Yes. As part of the rover payload, this is called the Ingenuity, and the idea is that this helicopter would be able to test the first kind of robotic flight on a different planet.
I think it looks
So
awesome.
The information I'm looking for that I haven't seen yet is, with the Martian atmosphere density being really different, is what do the flight mechanics look like? And I'm sure this has already been modeled out and tested. But like what it takes for lift and a lower density atmosphere is pretty dramatically different. The power needs, like the flight time, all of that kind of stuff is going to be super different. So I'm super interested. Also, the Martian soil, how that impacts like its ability to go certain places.
Yeah,
Very interested to see analysis of this.
There are winds there, right? You have storms, and the idea is that
It's not the same. The wind is very light, and the storms are very light compared to what you'd see on Earth.
This is not supposed to be long-term flight. This is 5 tests plan, 5 flights of 90 seconds each, once per day, and they're hoping for operational time 1 or more flights within 30 days, a 4-pound total payload for this helicopter, and its max speed will be horizontal speed. So it will not just go up and down; it will actually go out into the world, into Mars, 33 feet per second, or 10 meters per second. Maximum altitude, 16 feet. So that's a big limitation there in terms of how high they want it to fly up.
It's going to be great for surveying, taking photos. It's going to be awesome. I hope they do it, and I hope it's a success. I'd love to see that. That would be very inspiring.
I'm just amazed that this is something, even though it's been obviously in development for a couple of years now, that it's still not ready, but they think it can be ready for the 2020 launch to arrive in 2021.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Right. That just shows like their confidence in making this type of robot and the versatility in the Perseverance payload, that it could be something that makes it or something doesn't make it, but obviously it's a test bed for all these experiments that they want on this next rover. That does it for science, and we'll go to our last segment, which we'll go through relatively quickly as well. The VR Minute, virtual reality this week.
You know, Norman, there are some people that tune into this podcast just for this segment, and yet you leave it for the end, and then you often say, let's run through it quickly. Let's do it like only 1 minute. Let's go quickly. Let's do it.
It's called the VR Minute, Jeremy.
Let's invert the show next week, Jeremy.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Well, the big news in VR this week is a rumor, and that's why it's not so much big news. And Bloomberg had a story about they're reporting that Facebook Oculus, has plans for a smaller Quest as their next headset, and that it was in development to be released by the end of the year. Smaller meaning lighter, as well as controllers that will be backwards compatible with existing headset.
That is not news. None of what you just said is news.
It's not confirmed either, but none of it are new rumors. There's existing rumors being packaged as the news story.
Executives at Oculus have confirmed already, like months and months ago, that the next Quest would be smaller and lighter and better in every respect. Like they have said that. That is public knowledge. And then, a week or two ago, we saw more leaks about in the firmware for the new Oculus Quest, firmware, traces of another headset, other controllers, these Jedi controllers. And they've always said, like, as of the last Oculus Connect, they said the next Quest will be backwards compatible with current Quest. So that was on stage. So I'm just saying, there's a lot in this article that is not news to anyone who follows the industry.
Yes. What would only be news is timing.
Yeah.
If any of these plans for release is going to be delayed or more limited in capacity, I'm sure that's at odds with the momentum that they see from the Quest and Rift S being sold out during this time, and kind of the hunger for something that's, maybe there is less of a hunger because of the current headsets being satisfying. They're still straining to produce it, or they might want to get ahead on whatever PlayStation might do with next PSVR with the PS5, which we haven't heard anything about yet either.
That's an interesting point. Like they certainly have been on the phone with Sony, because they have two previous, it's no longer exclusive to Sony, but a couple titles that launched on PlayStation VR coming to Quest that have either leaked or been put onto the coming soon section. So clearly they're friendly with Sony. I wonder if there's going to be any kind of parity between whatever Sony's got in mind and whatever Oculus is working on in order to tie the VR industry together.
I wouldn't read anything into the upcoming non-exclusivity for the games being a relationship with Sony. I think that's just like contractual timing more so than anything. It's more by the development studio being relieved of their exclusivity obligation after a certain time, after being funded by one company or another. The big question I have for whatever Quest follow-up comes up is if Oculus decides to make this their desktop headset, as it was demonstrated at the Quest Link, how they can better support the Quest Link ecosystem, the ability to run Steam VR and desktop Rift games on the next mobile headset, either with a better type of included tether or better ergonomics for the tether, or improvements on the software side for reduced latency and better visual fidelity, or even options to customize, frame rate and resolution and compression.
I think that
streaming from the PC side.
I think the tether is a stopgap, and we will see that disappear on Quest, perhaps even, but certainly on the next generation, there's going to be wireless streaming.
That's the hope, right? That would be hope. I find it hard to believe that a physical tether, as much as in the long term it's a stopgap, would be in the next version be considered as loosely an integration as the Quest Link is right now.
Yeah,
Because
I don't know.
It's insufficient a tether for me.
I mean, virtual desktop is already so good, and if they had, if a guy who developed that software had Oculus's access to their own APIs internally, I bet that they could reduce the latency even more.
But that's so hardware dependent, more so than just the radios, but the routers. That's going to require much more user setup.
Well, Carmack suggested before he left the company that you could solve that problem with a dongle. So you just place it, you make it point to point from the computer to the headset rather than going through a router.
Right, USB 3 dongle. Yeah, I could see that. That would certainly make it much easier than because you want to be relatively close. I mean, you can be relatively close to your PC running the game anyway.
Yeah.
Interesting. Software side, so you alluded to this earlier. So Tetris Effect was previously exclusive on PSVR. It's one of those things that we've long said, if it was on a tetherless mobile headset, that would be so much fun, and it looks like it will be coming to Quest. It was found on the Coming Soon page.
It was then taken off the Coming Soon page, but yeah, it was briefly leaked, and screenshots were captured, and I am excited because this is a really good game. I mean, it is the ultimate drop-in for however long you want and jump back out kind of experience. And it's the best version of Tetris, in my opinion. I love it. It's the only game I bought on the Epic Game Store because it does run on a desktop VR if you buy it from there.
And then the other PSVR previous exclusive looking like it's coming to Quest is Mini Motor Racing X. I haven't played this before. What's this one about?
I haven't played it either, but it's a racing game.
Okay.
It looks like it launched on flat screen and PSVR, and I have no idea. It looks like a relatively mid-budget, good-looking racing game that's kind of got arcade aspects to it.
And then on the flip side, a previous Oculus exclusive, which was Vader Immortal from ILM X Lab, that's making its way over to PSVR.
I'm telling you, they've been in talks. I hope that means that PC is going to get the robot game, whatever that was called.
Which robot game?
The awesome one, the good one with all the little robots you run around, the first party PlayStation game.
Astro. No.
Yeah. Why not?
Astrobot. Because that was developed internally. See, all the games we're talking about when we're talking about Tetris Effect, Mini Motor Racing X, Vader Immortal, these are third-party studios that were paid for exclusivity as opposed to an internal studio. I think Sony still sees the Astrobot stuff as proprietary, internal competitive advantage for PSVR.
There is no difference between internal or external if the proper amount of money is spent on external. We don't know
pay for it.
We don't know what Oculus paid for Vader Immortal, but it was a lot of money because it has not gone on Steam yet, and there's been no talk of it. So it's possible. It's possible. We could. There was some sort of trade. I just fingers crossed because I love that game.
You'd love to play Astrobot Rescue Mission on a Quest.
I think more people should play it. I mean, the problem is that you would need a track controller.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Or you'd need to convert the controls for, for touch controllers.
And then on the side quest side, there is a new game called Davigo. Is that how you pronounce it? Davigo. This is been following the development of this on Reddit for a little bit, but this is a asymmetrical multiplayer game for VR where in VR, one player plays as a giant head, and then other players play on a PC running around with tiny characters fighting this giant head. There's a version of this on PSVR where you would have a VR headset versus players playing with characters on your TV, and even on the Quest side, you had that Squirrels Acron game that was mobile versus VR, and this seems to be another version of that. But the aesthetics are more basic here, and I think the humor is what people are going for, and so it's in public alpha now. You just got to join their Discord. I'll include a link in the show notes, and then you can try it for yourself.
Dude, public beta, Echo Arena on Quest.
Nice.
That also is the case.
It's so good. Have you tried it?
I haven't yet.
This
is arena, not combat, though.
No, it's just Arena, but Arena is to this day far more popular. I mean, it is the free it is the free game.
Yeah.
Echo Arena has been free for all Oculus users of any headset, and now it is open beta on Quest. So if you go to the app or go to the store inside the headset, you can just add it to your account for free and play it. And I played it yesterday with my son. Norm, man, they did a good job. They did a really good job. I mean,
With the
we played
tracking?
everything, like the graphics. These are big environments. There's a lot of people in them. Like there's voice and the interface, all of the procedural hand movements when you grab things, it's all there. I mean, the texture resolution is lower, and I'm sure the geometry has been compromised, but the guys at Ready at Dawn know what they're doing. Like they have some real cred when it comes to doing a lot on, mobile processors, and they have put that to use on the Quest to great effect. I mean, I'm really surprised by how well it runs. It's full 72 hertz. It's awesome.
And this is not crossplay, so it's Quest only.
It is crossplay.
It is crossplay. Interesting.
Oh, wait, but that might be coming. I think they had planned to launch that with the open beta, but that might still be in the works. Don't quote me on that's it, but it's coming. If not, it's already in.
All right. Well, that does it for this week's episode of This Only Test. Any last things you guys want to shout out?
I'm doing a weekly Twitch stream where we watch movies and then talk about the science. Last night, by the time you're listening to this, we did Alien, which is awesome.
Is this with a Netflix party?
We're doing different, depending on the movie, it's different systems. But yeah, there's different watch-along components.
Very cool. And again, if you have a question you want to ask us, we'll be answering at least one question every week from our Discord. Just go to discord.gg/tested, and there's This Is Only a Test channel. Hope to see you hanging out there. We've been hanging out there as well. And we do have a new outro for you this week. Very excited. Thank you for creating that. This one comes courtesy of Black Powder Engine. I've not listened to it yet, but if you want to create one, just search This Is Only a Test raw outro, and you can find the SoundCloud file for you to mix something together. We have a lot more videos on the site. Thank you again for listening. Thanks for supporting us. Thank you guys, Jeremy Kishore, for being here. And here is our outro for this week.
Hi there, I didn't see you. That's it.
The Mandalorian Baby Yoda, aka the child.
Not the child. Stop it. Stop it. It's Baby Yoda. Just, you've lost that battle.
You're right, Kishore. I'm not going to listen to what the corporate overlords tell me the way I should,
NVIDIA in all caps.
Or do it the way their corporate logo and branding want. We'll call Baby Yoda. Reactions on both sides.
That's it.
Thank you.
That's really good.
Thank you for that. I needed that.
And thanks for creating that outro file. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.